What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the Pika Pika Papa, and this is going to be one of my most favorite Sunday Fun Days in recent memory. And that is because here for a while, we have been seeing all kinds of like middle era Pokemon cards pop on the list from TCGPlayer that they share with us, which highlights their cards that have been moving and shaking the most over the last 7 days. We have seen a ton of XY. We've seen a ton of Sun and Moon. We've seen a little trickle of Sword and Shield here, but we have not seen a lot of Scarlet and Violet. And that's because, as we all know, Scarlet and Violet and Sun and Moon, the prices there have been softening just a little bit. But while those markets have been softening, the Sun and Moon and the XY era have been going absolutely gangbusters. But today, my friends, we are going to be talking about some of the biggest cards in the Scarlet and Violet era. Now, I know on the graphic right here, you see Secret Box and Tool Scraper, and yes, they highlighted those in the series that they sent out, but we don't talk about those types of cards here on this channel. We're looking for cards that are either right about to break out or have the potential to do so in the future, or if you're like me, if you're a long-term buy and hold collector / investor, then we're just looking for awesome cards from awesome sets with amazing Pokemon that have the opportunity for some really, really strong gains far into the future. And I think every card that we're going to talk about today has exactly that. Now, that does not mean that the current price that they're sitting at is where we should just be running out the door to pick up as many as we can. I think it's going to be very interesting over the next 6 to 12 months to kind of see what happens with the hobby. Are we going to start to flatten out a little bit? Obviously, as I said, we've seen a lot of cooling in some of these more recent eras. Or are we going to see what we've seen in the past, where we get like a maybe 6 or 8 week reprieve, and then all of a sudden it just takes off like gangbusters again? You know, as I always say, my crystal ball isn't working. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I do know for sure we're going to have a ton of fun as we look at these cards that have been moving and shaking the most on TCGPlayer. So with that being said, I got to give my selfish plug. If you get into the video, if you're having fun, we do this every Sunday, and we do a ton of fun content in between. So if you're enjoying it, hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those two small things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I really appreciate it. And since I said we're going to talk about the biggest cards from the Scarlet and Violet era, what else could we start off with than the Umbreon from Prismatic Evolutions? Now, what is interesting is when you look at the way this price has moved, you will see it is fundamentally different from a lot of the other cards that we have seen here in this channel, or where we've been talking about here as of late. And that's because you'll see it started off high and it has just been working its way down very steady. A lot of these other cards, we've started seeing some support lines form, right? Or we've seen some more, inconsistencies. This card came out in January. Now, obviously it's relatively new still, but think about it. I mean, we're coming up on, month number 5, and we're barreling down towards month number 6. And so the card's starting to get a little bit of an age to it. But even with all that being said, it's just been working its way down. Now, it started off incredibly high. I think coming in at $1,600 out of the gate was just a little bit unrealistic. And while that might be unrealistic, I think it's because a lot of people were comparing this, obviously, to the Moonbreon from Evolving Skies. And I don't think that's too unrealistic of a comparison when you look at the pull rates, and I've shared this data with you a whole lot. The Moonbreon had a pull rate of 1 in every 2,000 packs, and this one has a pull rate of about 1 in every 1,440 packs. And then when you think about it, Evolving Skies, you had the opportunity to sit down and rip a booster box, right? You could open 36 packs at one time if you wanted, but for this, we don't have booster boxes. You got to open ultra premium collections, or you got to open ETBs, or you got to open booster bundles. Like, it's just a very unique card, and it is going to be fascinating to see what happens with the big chase card from Scarlet and Violet actually coming from a specialty set. I mean, every single era so far, when you look at Sword and Shield, obviously we had the Moonbreon. When you look at Sun and Moon, obviously we had the Lovebirds. When you look at Scarlet and Violet, we're starting to see the card lineup for Black and White. Nothing in Black Bolt and White Flare is going to displace the Umbreon from Prismatic Evolution. So this is going to be the card. Every era has a card, but this era happens to be from a specialty set, which I think is going to be really interesting. So as I always do, I had to be extra because I can't just look at this graph, and I had to do a comparison to how the Moonbreon actually started out. And as you can see, like I mentioned, this price graph started high and it's been working its way back down, but that is exactly what happened with the Moonbreon. So here is the entire lifetime of the Moonbreon card and how its price has moved over time. And you will see that when it came out back in August of 2021, the starting price was $574. If you were not around back then, let me tell you, that is absolutely unheard of. But what's even more wild is, if you remember, the Rayquaza was actually priced higher than the Moonbreon out of the gate. Now, that didn't last very long, but remember, the Rayquaza was actually more expensive than this Moonbreon at first. So As you can see what happened, this is a huge price graph, so it's really hard to tell the individual months, but it came out in August. 4 months later, in December, the price had continued to come down, and it hit what would be its all-time low in December, where it came in at $170 4 months later. So again, think about where we're at right now with the Prismatic Evolutions Umbreon. We're about 5 months into it, right? And the prices continued to come down after starting from an unheard of high. Now again, the market now is very, very different than it was back then. People are paying much higher prices. I think people are kind of paying some of the premium for some of the price appreciation we're going to see in the future already. But if you were to line up how these cards have been moving, they've actually been moving relatively similar. So super cool comparison. I had a ton of fun doing this research, and I hope this gives you just a little bit of insight, as to how this card kind of stacks up to what the Moonbreon was doing and why the price decline. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. That's what we should expect. We should expect more cards to get ripped, hit the market, and prices to continue to come down. So with that being said, we got to look at the other big card, and I don't know if this is going to end up being the number 2. I certainly think Destined Rivals has a very, very strong case for being the top booster box set here in the Scarlet and Violet era. But if we're going to be talking about the biggest and baddest, we have to talk about Team Rocket's Mewtwo, even though I don't traditionally like talking about these cards this early in their life cycle. There's just too many unknowns. The market kind of acts irrationally to a degree now in the very, very beginning. But you can see this card was at like $450 pre-release. Obviously, once it came out, dropped like a rock, but it's actually working its way back up. So it has been coming up from that $330 price range, $320 price range. Now it's been working its way up to $370. Now, the one thing I will say, and I'm doing a ton of work on this, and so I'll have a whole video about it, is, again, the pull rates for the Team Rocket set for Destined Rivals, they're actually bad. They're not great. So the odds of pulling this card is 1 in about every 1,000 packs. So to use some comparisons, that's a little bit worse than the Gengar from Fusion Strike. It's a little bit worse than the Giratina from Lost Origin. It's a little bit worse than the Pikachu from Surging Spark. So when you combine that with the fact that it's coming from this amazingly hyped set. The artwork is awesome. Mewtwo is one of the biggest, names in the whole Pokemon space. So, I don't know if it warrants it coming out of the gate and maintaining that $370 price point, but it will be something that's interesting to keep an eye on. So, super cool card. And again, when we're talking the biggest and the baddest of Scarlet and Violet, we had to talk about these 2 cards first. But I also think it would be really cool to talk about some of the other cards from Prismatic Evolutions. And again, all of these were called out on the TCGPlayer movers and shakers list. So what I want you to do is look at how this price has performed, okay? See how it's got a little bit of a V pattern right there? We're gonna look at the second and third most valuable cards from Prismatic Evolutions. And what you will see when we click over to the Sylveon is it followed a very similar path. So the Sylveon started off ridiculously high. I mean, we're talking about $600, 600 plus, and it promptly came back down. Didn't plummet, but it did come down gradually, over the first month and a half, and then you'll see it kind of found that support line at $460. Once it hit the $460 point, people started to pile back in, and that is why you see it shoot all the way up over $500 again. Then what happens subsequently on the other side of that spike, it comes down again. So it's starting to make this little bit of a W pattern, right? Because if you see there on the right, it's starting to just inch up just the teeny tiny bit. Now, I don't know if it's going to continue that momentum. I don't know if we're just going to see some really short waves here where it kind of starts to find support. But what's interesting to me is you see it made its first drop and then bounce at that $460 point. And then again, it seems like it made a drop and it started to bounce at that $460 point. So in the back of my mind, I'm starting to think, okay, is the market just supporting this card at $450? Every time it gets down to $450, does the market say, this is not a $390 card, this is not a $425 card, we will buy this all day at $450, and that's why we see it continue to bounce up at that point. So it's going to be really interesting. I think the Sylveon card has the opportunity to do very well in the long run, and I do think we're going to see plenty more Prismatic Evolutions. Obviously, we have those Costco bundles which are coming out. People are going to literally knife fight over them in Costco stores, so I think we're going to have a lot of those injected into the hobby. A lot of them will be ripped. We'll see more cards, so it'll be really interesting. But as I said, we're not just going to look at the Sylveon. We'll also look at the Leafeon, and again, somewhat similar pattern here, a little more elongated, right? Because it didn't start off so irrationally high. It didn't start off over $600. It started off Still not a huge, I mean, still not a great price coming out of the gates at like 430. But again, what do you see? You see it drop down, and right around that $350 mark is where it started to find support. It bounced and came back up. Then it worked its way down, and again, $350 range, it starts to find some support, and it looks like it could be bouncing again. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But these are the patterns, and these are the things that I look for. These are things that I like to call out for you guys, because I never know what's going to happen in the long run. But if you can start to find that the market supports a certain card at a certain level, and if it's something that's on your wish list, you know, you can at least feel good about spending the money. Doesn't mean it won't break support lines. Support lines are broken all the time, but all you and I can do is make the best decisions we can with the best information we can have at our fingertips. So since we've talked about those, we're obviously going to jump into the Team Rocket Destined Rivals #2 card, which right now is the Cynthia's Garchomp. And when I was doing this video, I was really thinking about it, and what I like most about Destined Rivals, and I didn't realize it until I sat down to do this slide on the #2 card, is as I was looking at the top 5 cards, I made this argument in my head that just because Cynthia's Garchomp is #2 right now, I mean, any of the top 5 cards could actually surpass this one, and in the long run, end up as the #2 card, which is fascinating to me. You know, that Team Rocket's Moltres card is certainly one that I am a huge, huge fan of, and if I just had to pick a dark horse, I think it's the 4th most expensive card right now. I think that card has the opportunity to do really well. Obviously, we know, you know, Moltres is a wildly popular Pokemon. There's all kinds of mashups with the legendary birds and all this. Like, that card just, in the back of my mind, I think could do really well. Now, Garchomp has tons of cards that go for ridiculous amounts of money. Cynthia is wildly popular, so maybe it doesn't dethrone this as #2, but I do think that it will certainly do really well in the long run, which again, when you have multiple cards that are going to be up over that $100 price point, it just goes to show you how strong that set is. Now, this card right here, very different than what we saw, you know, in the Prismatic Evolutions Umbreon, and very different than what we saw in the Team Rocket's Mewtwo, right? Where we saw the Team Rocket's Mewtwo come down just like this one did, and then bounce up and start to increase in value. This one seems to just be settling right around the $200 price point. And as I've said before, you know, Destined Rivals is something I'm going to have a lot of in the collection, but I'm definitely going to let the dust settle. I'm going to let these cards work themselves out. I'm going to let more product hit the market, and then I'm going to start aggressively getting some of those sealed. And if you can see over my shoulder, I actually was fortunate enough to get a Pokemon Center exclusive Destined Rivals Elite Trainer box, which makes me very, very, very happy. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the content. I hope you enjoyed looking at these absolutely amazing Pokemon cards from the Scarlet and Violet era. I think they have some incredible long-term price appreciation opportunity. For me, I'm just going to kind of let things settle for a little bit, but you do what makes you happy. And as I always say, if you made it to the end of the video, if you had a ton of fun, hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those 2 small things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I really appreciate it. You have an awesome one, and I'll talk to you soon. See you later, everybody. Bye.